This is our February meeting of the Dispute Resolution Advisory Committee that came out of Senate Bill 586. And we may have one member of the public joining us who is a potential member to represent our open seat we have for manufactured dwelling park manager / owner representative. So if they do join us, we'll pause and do introductions in that. So welcome everybody. Happy New Year and that. And it's nice to see everybody. Last meeting was a little short in that. And with that, if people want to review and make any motions for corrections or amendments to the January meeting minutes. And just see a hand there, John.
So Brian, there's one correction, at least I think, on the minutes from the January meeting. I wasn't there, but I know the discussion, and this is at the top of page 5, where Kim is discussing the CDRC contract and the attorney contract. The second, I don't know how many sentences it is, but the third sentence, I think, that starts attorney contract, making sure billing funding pieces line up. Don't want to put in a funding structure that Oregon Law Center agrees with. It should say disagrees with. So with that amendment, I move approval.
Do we have a second? Tara has a second. All in favor, voice aye or raise hands. And we have everyone's hand up for unanimous approval of the minutes. And being that we're in day 2, Groundhog's Day of the legislative process, any updates, John? Or Alexandria was here and she jumped off. Guessing she may have gotten pulled away.
So yes, it is day 2. There was some drama yesterday over electing a new speaker since Tina Kotek has left. She resigned to run for governor. And there were protests by people who don't believe they should be required to wear masks. I don't know whether there were hearings yesterday, but there were certainly hearings today. So this is the short session, 5 weeks, constitutional limit. It's got to end by the first week of March. The 2 housing committees continue with the same chairs. Senator Casey Jama in the Senate, which meets for the first time this afternoon at 3, and Representative Julie Fahey, who's chair of the House Housing Committee. She is also now the majority leader, so that's a huge job, and she'll be busy. That committee met this morning. They're both going to meet Monday, Wednesday, morning and afternoon. Fahey's committee met this morning. It only had one bill on the agenda, and that bill was HB 4125, proposed by Representative Nathanson, also from Eugene. He makes minor changes, or proposes to make minor changes to the applicant screening charge statute, 90.295, which I negotiated and wrote in 1993. And that the hearing went pretty well this morning. No real controversy there. The 2 of the 3 landlord groups submitted written testimony opposing, but partly it was like, oh, come on, leave us alone. And that reflects, I think, what I've said previously in writing before the January meeting, that I didn't expect any major landlord tenant legislation in this session. And so far that's holding true. The one exception, the 2 exceptions to that, and one of those was scheduled this morning and got pulled. I don't know what that means. It's 4137, House Bill 4137 from Representative Meek. And it is a bill that would authorize and regulate an insurance product, which landlords could make tenants pay monthly charge to insure the landlord. So the landlord would be the customer, the insurance customer, have a contract with an insurance company, and it would insure the landlord, but the tenant would pay for it with a monthly charge as an alternative to paying upfront security deposit. The proponent for this is a company in Southern California named LeaseLock. They submitted a bill in the 2021 session. Oregon Law Center and a bunch of other people opposed. Representative Meek had a work group that met 4 concentrated times in October. We did not reach agreement. Representative Meek introduced the bill anyway. We indicated that we were still concerned. And yesterday morning, the bill got pulled. It was scheduled for hearing this morning. It got pulled. I don't know whether that means that Representative Meek wants to work on it further to address the other concerns we've listed, or who knows? I don't know. He hasn't told us. The other bill that is significant that has to do with the landlord-tenant world has to do with cooling, and it is it's a Senator Jama bill. It reflects the horrendous heat wave from last summer in which people died, tenants died. And the bill is pretty broad. The staff is being developed by an amazing person at Verde, a nonprofit in Portland, named Oriana Magnera. The bill is, I'll figure it out and tell you in a minute. But it is it's a complicated bill, and it's got a number of parts to it. One big part of it is trying to fund cooling machines of some sort for landlords and for tenants. There are a lot of existing units that don't have cooling. Another part of it is to require that future construction include either cooling or a cooling room or some way to get cool. A third part of it is to prohibit landlords with existing units from prohibiting tenants from having cooling machines. Now, there's some nuances there because a lot of people are concerned about tenants putting heavy old air conditioning units in windows and having them fall out of the window and hit somebody on the head. But then there are lots of other instances in which some landlords have viewed air conditioners as unpleasing aesthetically. An example of that has to do with manufactured home parks, where a number of manufactured park landlords over the years have prohibited air conditioners in windows. And if you're familiar with older style manufactured homes, you know that they're basically little heat boxes in the summertime that heat up. So we already passed a law prohibiting landlords from doing that in manufactured home parks, and this would be broader to apply to all apartment tenancies. So that bill is still being developed to make sure it works, and there are some older buildings that are not electronically capable of handling the load from an air conditioner. So the proponents are trying to figure out how to make all that work. One other part I forgot to mention is that it calls for a cooling room. So somewhere in a multi-unit building where tenants could go when the temperature gets above a certain height to cool off. So those are the only significant landlord tenant bills I'm aware of. The governor has proposed another $200 million for housing, mostly for affordable housing development, a little bit for rent assistance or things related to that. There continues to be interest in something that the CDRCs are interested in, and that is eviction avoidance or prevention. We had a conversation just yesterday with Housing and Community Services about that. I think there's interest. I also had a conversation with Representative Marsh and Senator Oldham from Brian's area, who are getting encouraged by Brian's organization to do something about this subject. And I think there will be an effort to do something about the subject. I don't think it can happen in the 2022 session because, in my view, it will require amending eviction law, and that's not going to happen in this short session. Third thing to note for the legislative session is the turnover. Besides the fact that Kotek is left as speaker, The previous majority leader also stepped down. The previous minority leader also stepped down. Senate President Peter Courtney, the longest serving Senate President, is going to step down after the session. There's a whole bunch, it's like almost a third of the legislature is new. So you're going to have a steep learning curve this next month. I think I'll stop there.
And John, remind me, what is the date that bills have to be submitted, the cut date, or?
It's already passed.
Okay, no, that's what I couldn't remember. I knew in the short session there was lots of pieces.
So the next deadline is that bills must move out of the first committee by the February 14th. So things are, I mean, this is going to boot wham, wham, wham. And they've got a lot of bills. And people with power, like the speaker, could still introduce a bill. But run-of-the-mill legislators don't have that power.
No, thanks for that. And with that, I'm going to pause. And actually, Angela, before I have you reply, I'm going to give Heather a chance to introduce our guest and potential new member, hopefully, if we don't scare them away.
This is Pat Baxter, I think is how it's pronounced. And I've actually seen her name a lot come through. Last night was in a mediation and realized that that as a park manager, she has some of those perspectives that we've been looking for and hoping for. And then also she, by her own confession, is a friend of mediation, so it uses it frequently with good results. So I called her this morning and said, would you consider? And she has joined us this I guess it's still morning.
Well, welcome, Pat. My name is Brian, and I'm the chair and work for a center down in Southern Oregon in NAT, and we'll let folks do a quick introduction. And Angela, I'm going to have you go last so then you can speak to the question you just had. So we can start with Tara.
And you just said introductions, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Tara Cleland, I'm with East County Resolution City of Gresham, and my pronouns are she, her.
And John?
John Van Landingham, Oregon Law Center / Lane County Legal Aid. I represent low-income tenants, and I've done this for almost 45 years.
And then I'm going to let the staff introduce themselves real quick. And the one, Pat, you would be connecting with after this would be Rick. So I'll let you go first for your staff.
Okay. Well, good morning. Rick Abrego, Assistant Director of Manufactured Housing. Welcome. And I guess I'll let Carla, if you want to go next there.
So I'm Carla Jacobson, and I work with an MMCRC, and you probably hear from me a lot if you have questions regarding park registration, the annual registration. You get lots of emails from me because I handle most of that type of stuff. If there's anything to do with that, and then if you have questions regarding anything else, that's kind of, you work with me and myself and Ken a lot with situations with tenants and stuff. So you hear from me a lot with emails regarding registration. That's me.
Thanks, Carla. And then Ken?
Yeah, I'm Ken Pryor, and I'm the program coordinator for the MMCRC, and I've been with the agency 13 years. And basically what I do is answer questions and assist in some of the program development. So.
Sorry about that, Kim. Sorry to step on you there.
No.
And then, of course, Angelica, she's definitely our most important person there, helping us out.
Sorry, for some reason I'm having video issues this morning, but I'm Angelica and I'm here just keeping taking notes, and I'll draft the minutes for the meeting. and prepare the agendas. Welcome.
And I'll give it back to you, Brian.
Yeah, and Angela?
Did we get everyone? Okay. I'm Angela, and I am a advocate for floating homeowner tenants who own their houses and rent space from a marina landlord.
Great, and those who aren't here, part of the committee is Nancy, who is with OSTA, and then Patrick Sponsler, who is with the Oregon Community Dispute Resolution, which is the grantor for the community CDRs, and Jan, who is an owner of a marina. And that are the other members. And our main charge is to advise the Oregon Housing on the commute resolution issues related to the Senate Bill 586, which is that mandatory mediation component and utilizing of mediation. We've been looking for someone to represent the owners and managers as well, because one of the roles of the committee is to have that diversity so everybody has a voice and we cover all the sides with it. So welcome. And like I said, Rick would be the one who would take care of the formality piece, and he can also help if you're interested in wanting to see minutes or other pieces from past meetings to get a sense of who we are and what we've done. So back to the agenda, and that was the legislative piece. And Angela, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I do, about the cooling bill. I just wanted to let you know, John, that I have also seen in marina leases the prohibition, the banning of window units, as well as one of the marina rules that tenants sign off on. And I seem to have remembered that this came up maybe last year in legislation, but I for some reason thought that somebody had passed something that allowed people to put window units in their homes in parks and marinas. Did I just completely make that up?
So if I could answer, the group formerly known as the Manufactured Housing Landlord Tenant Coalition, in one of its bills a year or two or couple of sessions ago, amended the termination statutes for facility tenancies, which would include marinas, to prohibit landlords from treating aesthetic concerns like window air conditioners as a basis for terminating. So you're already protected from that. And anyway, this new bill also would apply to marinas as well. It would apply to all Chapter 90 tenancies. And while I'm at it, if I can, Brian, I just realized when you were running through who's on the membership that the minutes failed to note that that Jan Hammer was present at the January meeting. So
Yeah.
Maybe we could amend those to add Jan's name.
Great catch. Thank you. And with that, the next one is the landlord training, which I know Ken and Jan and Angela have been working on as far as that update for their curriculum requirements to cover and include the floating home content. And for you, Pat, this year is the first year that marinas and floating homes are covered under the statute of communities, and that as part of the phase-in of that Senate Bill 586. So that's where that add-on is coming. So Angela or Ken, whichever one.
Well, we've been working on it for quite a while. Jan was supposedly going to be joining us, at least by the phone. I spoke to him shortly before 10 o'clock. But we've got a list of basically their statutes and how they're applied, and what they're, in layman's terms, what they mean, and then also a reference to the actual statute. And it's going to be sort of a multi-purpose document if we do it properly. It's planned to be an addendum to the fact sheet that denotes requirements for buying and selling a manufactured home or floating home. So this would be sort of an addendum to it, and we would piece all that together. I mean, there were about 30 or so different items. A good many of them are overlap with what goes on in the park world, and we're going to highlight the ones that are particular or pertain to the floating home environment. But it's a listing of kind of a frequently asked questions and gives responses, and it can be used as an outline for landlord training or just an informational piece. We've labored over this thing for so long. Angela's got it now, and she's putting it into a format that won't embarrass us all. But it's, I think at the last, there was 10 or so pages. It doesn't eclipse the fact sheet that John put together on water billing. That wasn't a guideline, but what we did use as a guideline of the training that we saw, primarily from Charlie Greff. And so we've got it all. We think we've got it nailed down, and now we have to do formatting and cleanup. But the concept is that we're going to go back to Charlie and John and Chuck as well to get their input on it. But I think we're probably a couple weeks away from that. Jan has been out with family that was ill, so he hasn't had a chance to really go through it, but thoroughly. But he had positive comments, and Angela's kind of the real expert on this whole process, and she feels good about it. And I can let you, Angela, chime in and give your perspective, but we think that within a couple of weeks we're going to be able to give something that people can look at.
Yeah, I'm super, super excited about this. This has been something I'm very passionate about just in general. And it's the reason, just to remind everyone, the reason that we're doing this is because, marina landlords have not been involved in any training about the laws, and therefore frequently they break the laws. So this is just a way to have input into the training that's going to be required, but just in case the training doesn't get spent on the things that are important in the marina world from a tenant's perspective, we're creating this list based on issues that we've seen come up time and time again for marina tenants. And it's just sort of like an informational handout, and it has no bias to it. It started off with hey, these are the list of issues that we've been seeing over and over again in marina life. And we've condensed it down to really just the answers, the chapter 90 statutes that speak to these things. Because I think most times when marina tenants are signing a lease, when they're purchasing a new house, they don't have any idea what the laws are. So it's just kind of hey, by the way, this is, your lease can't have you sign away your chapter 90 rights, because we've seen that in a couple leases. Hey, the landlord wants the tenant to sign a lease that says, hey, you agree that there's nothing in this lease that's in violation of chapter 90. Well, that's in violation of statute. So it's just, it's going to be a really great piece. I think it's going to be clear. And it also, the landlord attorneys are the ones that get to do the training. So, in a way, just keeping to the statute, there's nothing that that a marina attorney can argue about because it's the law. So these are just things that we're highlighting to keep people informed. I read the notes and I saw that there was a discussion and a draft of a welcome letter from the OHCS, which I applaud. I think that is fantastic. I'm super excited about it. And one of the things I think would be really nice, because what we discovered in our group and talking is that there's, park landlords have been attending these trainings for years. And so they kind of have a base level of knowledge about Chapter 90, whereas marina landlords really, for the most part, I'm familiar with nearly all of them. None of them have really any sort of formal training or knowledge of the law. So there's like a base level of just Chapter 90 law. And then there's a level of laws that pertain just to marinas. And then there's a level of laws that are more important in a marina environment than they are in a park environment. So just trying to highlight those things. I think it would be great considering that this welcome letter, I take it, is going to marinas. Is that correct?
So Angela, can I speak to that for a second too?
Yeah.
So I know we've worked on the letter and we've talked about this letter, but I want you to know that when we get a new landlord or a new owner of marinas or parks, I specifically reach out to that landlord or the owner, and I specifically, not just a letter, but I talk to them and I try to just not only talk to them about what their responsibilities are as a landlord as far as what they, that type of thing. But so I tell them who we are, what we do, and what our agency does, and that type of thing. So the letter would kind of be a backup to kind of what I do, so it's more of a personal thing too. So we get to build that relationship with them as the owner, as an agency with that owner, as far as like registrations and their landlord training or marina training, that what their responsibilities are. And as somebody from their park or marina has to have this training. And so that it's more of as well as the letter, but more of a personal thing too, so that they get to know us and they get to know that who we are and what we do and that type of thing too. So yeah, that's kind of what I try to touch base with them as a conversation too as well.
That's awesome. I love this. I love this process. I love the letter. And I wonder too, if we could add a couple of bullet points or one bullet point to the letter. It's a suggestion more than anything, but this is like you said, the first time that the marina landlord has had any contact with OHCS, and probably the first time they're realizing that there are a whole new set of things that they have to comply with. I know one thing that we're not seeing is landlords giving prospective tenants the informational handout about the rights from the OHCS. They're not giving that, and they're not giving the handout about mandatory mediation. So maybe we could add in that great list, hey, by the way, another statute to know is that you're supposed to deliver the mandatory mediation information and to your tenants, and the rights handout when buying and selling a floating house. It's just a thought. That way, it's just one more way that they can realize the value, like, oh, here they're pointing out another part of the compliance that I have to do. Maybe there's things I didn't know and I should look into more of the statutes or call the office.
Yeah, this is Rick. I'll go in on, I'll write that down and see what we can work that in. I think on the agenda, we're going to be discussing that, right? Let's see. I thought I saw some letters. I think we're discussing it, so we can, because I'm sure, I know we sent it out, and I was just going to see if anybody had a chance to read through it all. But if that's, I was looking in the agenda. I thought we set aside something to discuss.
It's, I guess, could be under item 10, the non-compliance.
There you go. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, then we could talk about both letters, the at that time. But yeah, I'll write that down for now, and then I'll add that to whatever changes that we additional the suggestions that we can put in there. But at least we got something. What I'm happy about is we got something on the board to work from so that we can fine tune that. But thank you.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
And with that, we can kind of ties to it is update and review on that ongoing project that we've had and kind of put on the shelf off and on for the Q&A. And John, your name is next to that, or your initials, and which was that standardized kind of Q&A for the mandatory mediation and other issues, which I think have been discussed. And I know Angela was submitting some stuff to you a while back, and I think Heather, you were a part of that as well, and just was going to pick that back up, being that you've been able to come up for air.
So speaking just for myself, I haven't done a damn thing on that. And I can't remember what I was supposed to do. And I can't remember whether there was somebody who was going to do something before I did something. I don't know whether Heather was going to, somebody from one of the CDRCs was going to summarize some feedback from the CDRCs about questions they had that I would then try to answer. And I can't remember whether that happened and whether it's my responsibility to do the next step.
And with that, there's also the piece of the flow chart for mandatory mediation. So
I would go back to, I think in our flow chart and the completion of that, we actually took care of the Q&A that John was going to help us with. And that's the questions that we had ended up in the flow chart or answered in a different pictorial way. I think as far as what our center or the centers were asking, they were answered in the flow chart.
So I've got the flow chart here. It was with the December meeting notice, and it does have on the second page of it. It has some descriptions of stuff. So if the CDRCs are okay, then I don't have any great need to write anything more. As Ken noted, I'm famous for writing things that are way too long and too complicated, and then nobody can understand them except me, which is a brilliant strategy, but I don't need to keep doing that. So maybe we're done with that task.
I motion that we take it off the agenda and off the ticker that says we've got something left to do on it.
Sounds.
I'm okay. So I didn't. Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
At once. I just didn't realize that we were not going to do that piece anymore. So I put in some time in advance to prep and think through the questions. So I guess if we're getting rid of the Q&A facts part, then I would like to relook at the flow chart with a different filter now, instead of just here's an additional handout. I'd like to just, for me, make sure that it answers the question. So if we want to take it off the agenda, great, but I would like to still look at it and just make sure that it still meets the original intention of the Q&A from my perspective, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I guess a little reframe would be being that the marinas is the newer component, and if with that, if there is a piece that was created in that of bringing that forward for the new members who are covered under that, it may be a helpful document and resource on that piece for marina residents and owners who are new to this whole process. So I would endorse and encourage that focus, because they are, like you said, just learning about it and often don't know some of the basics in that. And so.
Yeah, I can review it in the next, probably this weekend, and let everybody know if I think it did that.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and just amend it with the focus for that. But I think at this point, it sounds like we can take John's name off of the name of responsibilities
Yeah.
at this point. So we will do that. And then other pieces, we kind of jumped down to item 11, which was the mediation flow chart, the final review and approval, and being that we were starting that conversation, would take that out of order, or believe it's there, and this was just the final piece. And I know I personally didn't see anything. It sounds like Heather, you didn't, and John with those fresh eyes. So I think it's good to go, it sounds like. Oh, yes,
The
sir.
exception, I guess, that Angela would want to review it now through the lens of it covering the floating home.
Yeah, and
And I don't know that it's necessary, the covering of a marina tenancy versus a park tenancy, and maybe it just can't be answered. But some of the questions that I had, I just flipped it up and looked at it. But some of the questions that I had originally had is, what happens when a committee of 7 wants to mediate? And what happens, how do they go about doing that? And then what happens with the 1 month's rent or 3 months rent, whatever the damages are, if someone doesn't participate in something down the line? Those are some of the questions that were that have been asked by committees of 7s and other groups. So that I did not see in the flow chart. So I would
So it may be that those questions more appropriately fall into a discussion of whether there are possible improvements to the mandatory mediation statute. It does not address committees of 7. Committees of 7 are a little bit odd and have their own weaknesses anyway. I've been asked recently by a tenant who joined a committee of 7, how do you get rid of a non-productive member? Oh no, the statute doesn't say. And so, the committee of 7 has the power to ask a landlord to talk. That's about it. And that's different from mandatory mediation, where there's a statute that says the landlord can't file an MED unless the landlord agrees to mediate in good faith. So the mandatory mediation has much more of a hammer to it than the committee of 7 does. I think that I wasn't involved when the committee of 7 stuff was drafted. I think it was the early 90s. And I think the concept was that if we could just get in a room and talk, we could work some things out. And I think often that's true. Although you'll note that committees of 7 cannot make a landlord talk about rent increases. And that's because the landlords didn't think that would be productive. They thought they would just get yelled at. Anyway, Angela, I'm going to guess that most of the, and I think it's worthwhile for you to go back and look at your notes of what you think still are remaining questions that could be clarified. But I'm going to guess that most of them are things that the statute doesn't help. And so a lawyer like me could not give you a clear yes or no answer.
And maybe one of those that I would encourage is we possibly put the brochure, because I know the manufacturing communities has a brochure on the committee of 7 piece, that maybe we could share that out to the membership and we can have a discussion based on that brochure at the next meeting, because
I think it's less even about the committee of 7. It's really about the statute that allows for mandatory mediation. There's something in that statute, a couple of things actually, whereby the damages awarded are for, I think, someone who, there's damages. And if your committee of 7 brings your landlord to, or initiates mediation against or with the landlord, then if they don't show up, I mean, does everybody file a case in court to get the periodic rent damages awarded. Questions like that. And if the statute doesn't answer those, maybe it's just, maybe there's a facts or Q&A part that says the statute doesn't really address this, other than it says you have a right to damages. How you get those is going to be determined by the judge on the day of your court hearing or something like that.
Which is, yeah, kind of what that brochure says, of where you have to file in court in that. And I think the hard part is some of these things, they haven't been tested, and there's been no legal precedences, established. And I think it might just be helpful, like I said, to relook at that brochure that talks about that. And maybe it's a one for all of our education to understand the Committee of Seven and how it's structured, to make some suggestions and input for future changes or modifications to the brochure and or possible legislative concepts. But as John, to help get that, because it is a confusing gray area that there is no definitive answer at it.
Yeah, and one of the other things, I believe, you can mandatory mediate over a rule change now. So is that all 120 residents attending a mediation? So those are the questions that we got when this first rolled out. So those were the things that I wrote up, and those are not in the sheet, but maybe they're, like we said back then, there may not be an answer, but I think it would be a good idea to just write that there is no answer.
And that would be something that I would guess we would address in that brochure, the Committee of Seven, and what that is and what those rights and opportunities are. So does that sound like a good way to?
Yeah, except that it's not necessarily related to a Committee of Seven. It's a rule, so it would be related to everybody in the marina or the park.
And I think, but more what I'm hearing is that confusion and complication around where the mandatory mediation, is it an individual versus this older statute that is there for this Committee of Seven? How do we as an advisory committee, what recommendations would we make?
Yeah, as long as we're agreeing that it's not really just about the Committee of Seven or a former statute, it's really just the new statute is unclear in certain areas. So I just listed two. One is Committee of Seven, one is rulemaking, not related to the Committee of Seven. So there were others on the list that I generated back in the summer. I just would have to relook at that list to see what they all were.
Yeah, no, I think that is the rulemaking piece in that.
But I think it would help give guidance to people, like groups like OSTA, when people call in and say, hey, the landlord didn't meet with my Committee of Seven, what do I do? Or they're trying to change a rule and all the tenants want to do mandatory mediation. How do we do that? So just, having an answer so that groups like us can know what to tell tenants would be good.
The problem,
the answer is, I don't know.
So again, I think that would benefit from Angela being clear, going back and reviewing her notes and seeing exactly what the questions were. I remember vaguely, I don't remember them clearly. But I will note that in writing that statute, I was not thinking about group mediation. I've been involved in some mediations long ago where there was more than one party. But the idea of having 40 tenants versus one landlord was not contemplated here. And just provision is 1 month's rent. And Angela's right. Is that every tenant gets 1 month's rent, or 1 month's rent divided among the 40 tenants? So it was not written with those things in contemplation. And then a legal answer would have to say, I don't know. I don't know how helpful that would be to anybody. Anybody could look at the statute right now and say, well, that doesn't address that. Anyway, I'll wait and see what Angela comes up with.
Great. And with that, I think it will actually take us to a couple items when we have Rick for you for reporting, and on the CDRC electric electronic data submission. And where that's at, I know
I
can share that the contracts have gone out. And
so go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So on item 8, it's still in process on getting the electronic data. We have our research team working on that right now. So I don't have a definitive answer for you. So, I actually had put out an email to the person that's working on it, and they hadn't gotten back to me. But I know the last conversation was they were working on it. So that's as far as I can give you on that. But I will follow up as soon as I get a definitive answer of where we are, and then maybe hopefully some kind of estimated time. As far as the let's see, what was your other question? What was the second part of that?
Oh, the second part was the non-compliance letter.
Okay, we sent that out to everyone. I hope we sent out 2 letters, the non-compliance and the welcome letter, and we were hoping that everybody had a chance to review them, and we can actually talk about. Let's see, we'd be actually we're right there anyway. Creation of the glossary and so on. I'm not quite sure on the CDRC's outreach, 3 attempts to reach party. I'm not quite sure what exactly that entailed. And so unfortunately, I'm not prepared for that particular question. But as far as a non-compliance letter, I hope everybody had a chance to look at that along with the welcome letter. And then I know that we've just hired someone on to help us with, language access, and, which is great. So we're actually starting to discuss how we can best do things, and actually working with public relations also to figure out where we can go with that, and how we can do it. And then to load prior data, and none of that, I'm not sure about the strategy to load prior data from the old grant report, exhibit D to new system. So those I would have to follow up on you for, and then I can get you guys answers as soon as I get something on those. But as far as the letters are concerned at this point, we could talk about those now if you'd like.
Yeah.
So then going back to what we were originally speaking about, the welcome letter, I'm assuming everyone had a chance to read that and possibly took some notes or had suggestions on that, or tips or ideas. What did you think of it?
I think it's great.
Yay. Anyone else? If you haven't, that's fine. I mean, I just would, what we're looking for is, to have somewhat of an approval of, this works, or we need to tweak it a little bit and then send it back out, and then, get that over to public relations to make sure that we're covering everything correctly. And then get those out when we get registrations in, or new registrations in. It might not be a bad idea to just send it out in general to everyone, just so that they have it on paper and not their own notes when they're in a conversation, and they'll have it in writing.
So Rick, I did read it, and this is John.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm getting an echo. I did read it, and I thought it was very good. I had a couple of really minor things. The only one of significance really was to ask Angela whether the reference in the first paragraph to marina communities should say something about floating homes, because we don't cover liveaboards, which is an acquired term from me. I didn't know what they were before getting involved with all this. So I defer to Angela about whether the reference to marinas should single out floating homes in particular. And then there are two very minor editing things. In the section that's titled landlord training, the last sentence is a run-on sentence. There should be a period after every 6 months and a capital F for 4. And then there should be a period instead of a comma at the end of the section on sale transfer of deed.
When you're done capturing that, I have a thought, a response to what John said.
Okay.
So I would agree. Thank you, John. I actually did think about that when I read that, and I forgot to bring it up. I would definitely say floating home communities. And if this is going specifically to marina landlords, I would even go so far as to say floating home tenant communities, or floating rental floating home, no, floating home. We call them rental mortgages. That's just kind of how we refer to them amongst ourselves. Because when I first read this and it said, oh, to marina communities, I thought, well, it doesn't cover boat marinas, and it doesn't cover liveaboard marinas. But even then, it doesn't cover all floating home marinas. It really only covers people who own their homes and rent the slip. So if we could, wherever it reference, like in the entry paragraph, when it references marina communities, I think it would be better to say floating home communities where there are tenants, or something like that, where tenants own their homes and rent their slips. Because I wonder, it is a small community of landlords. And if this goes out to a rental marina and they're talking to an ownership marina where the tenants own the marina itself, then they might wonder, oh, well, I didn't get one. So then you might get people wondering why they're not getting letters.
Okay, so we just need to
Can I,
clean that up a little bit, or at least, because do me a favor, Angela, and just if you could email me what you would, and kind of, because we need to kind of fit it into the letter, and then because we're welcoming, how we've structured it, so welcome to parks and marina communities. We still would need to dovetail into the rest of that, the body of that letter. So I'm trying to figure out what the wording would look like so that it's more, we're welcoming them without going, so we can address them properly, I guess is what I'm looking for, without causing confusion in how we're writing it. Am I clear on that?
Yes.
I thought, and if I'm confirming, usually these welcome letters go out to, I thought, because to new park / marina owners, not necessarily, I'm not saying, and then, or landlords, am I correct? Because that's what I usually do. I reach out to the ones who are, because when I reach out to, if I get a letter of conveyance from a letter of conveyance that a park has sold, then I reach out to the new owner and I say, oh, this is what your responsibilities are. And then I lay out like the responsibilities. And so I was wondering if that's what this letter is, that's what this letter is for, is to lay out what the responsibilities are as a new owner, and also what the landlord's responsibilities are. Am I correct? Is that what this letter, that's what this letter is in regards to? For the landlords / owners, it's not just going out to the landlords, it's going out to the new owners, because that's what I thought the letter was for.
That's kind of what I thought it should be, because you're going to get, we've experienced a lot of turnover, so it should apply to change of ownership. That's what I was assuming. Because that's where the lag comes, and and getting people to understand their obligations for training, et cetera, is that we don't get a letter of conveyance now necessarily, but that would be the ideal way to inform them. It's sort of an all-purpose letter to new ownership.
Yeah.
I wonder, so when I read it, I wasn't there last month, so I don't know what the genesis of the letter was. Either intention is fine, but when I read the letter, there was nothing in there that kind of precluded like left out an existing marina landlord. I mean, keep in mind that none of these landlords, with the exception of a very small handful, even know that Chapter 90 exists or that they have to follow it. So given the small number of letters, maybe we should consider sending it to all marina landlords on the list.
And that's great. I think that would be good for new marina owners. I think that's fantastic. I think that's a good idea for new marina owners. And then when new manufactured park owners, when I get letters of conveyance for new manufactured park owners, we send it to them as well. But I totally 100% agree for new marina owners, because they're new to the whole program, and I'm having to do a lot of explaining, but I didn't necessarily think that we should send it to all the manufactured home park owners, but to new ones when we get those in, when I get letter of conveyance of new owners. That's one,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, just because, like you said, the marina owners are wholly unfamiliar with OHCS or their, commitment or OHCS's relationship to them. And they also haven't been involved in any of the training like the other park owners have. So it makes sense that the letter would come for new people in the park setting because of turnover and new managers and things like that. But almost exclusively at rental marinas, it is the owner, landlord, and manager. They're all the same person, almost always in rental marinas.
That'd be great. And I could
They hold for a long time.
Yeah, and that's where you and I could talk together and find out. Meet with me. That's perfect. That's awesome. That sounds great.
And I think the term landlord is a great example of something to add to that common definition area. And it may just be a simple cut and paste out of the statute just to help people ground, because it could be an owner, it could be an on-site manager, it could be that of getting some of those frequent terms in there.
And where are you talking about, Brian? Is it right at the landlord training then after that, right?
Right after that, you actually have the verbiage on that landlord training. That next sentence actually says, and floating home communities. And if you use that same verbiage up earlier where Angela was suggesting.
Gotcha. Okay. And we still need to figure out what that's going to be, correct? Angela?
And I also think that if I know the owner or the landlord for these marinas, I can personalize it and write it and make the letter to those individuals, because that makes it more personable and makes it more so they in that level too. And if I don't, then I can make it out. If I'm not for sure, we can make it a blanket for some of those. That makes it more of it's a connection with that marina.
I like
So
that.
let me just suggest that you not change the first sentence in the landlord training section where it says the statute requires landlords or managers, blah, 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 other than the floating, if you want to add the floating home stuff that we've been talking about. So the definition, the nuance here is that the definition in 90.100 define landlords to include managers. So for example, earlier last month when you all were talking about could a manager qualify under Senate Bill 586 for the Dispute Resolution Advisory Committee, the answer is yes, because Chapter 90 defines landlords to include managers. But with regard to the training statute, there's a distinction made between on-site managers and non-on-site landlords. So I wouldn't change. I'd leave that like it is and make them, if they want to know whether it's the manager or the landlord that has to do the training, they're going to have to do a little research or talk to Ken.
Okay, so just for clarity for me taking notes on this, the consensus is to change it or leave it alone? Because I got both. They both make sense to me. I just need, I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by all of you. So,
I raised it initially in the first paragraph,
uh-huh,
where it simply says marina communities. And
Right.
my point was maybe I ought to say floating home communities. That's actually the language used in the landlord training section at the bottom of that page. So I would not change the stuff, the section on landlord training. I think I would change the opening paragraph, and I would defer to Angela as to what it ought to say.
okay, so for now, go ahead. Angela, were you saying something or? Oh, so for now, based on what you just said, I'd change the opening then to reflect the floating home communities. So then,
And I see nods from both the Marine Evan folks.
right, so then and then leave the landlord training alone, correct? Okay. 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 Anything else on that?
Just a little typo on that very first sentence. There's an extra E at the end of the very first sentence. It's introduce space E space the.
Okay.
I was assuming that was some sort of computer trick to replace the E with the name or something, but
Yeah, and going down to the dispute resolution header, I would encourage you to check with Patrick, because we're not certified dispute resolution centers. But we are, I don't know what term he would want to use. I mean, it is because we're approved is what I would kind of defer to myself, but I don't know if Heather or Tara have any thoughts on that.
He's affiliated.
Does it need an adjective?
It just says, that's true. We could just take it out and just say,
Just from the CDR or from the Oregon Community Dispute Resolution Centers. And those would be the ones that are currently on the roster at any given time.
yeah.
So instead of certified community dispute, you're talking about just rewriting that to Oregon?
Or just removing the word certified.
Okay, which one? Just remove the word certified then
Yeah.
with everyone?
Yes,
Okay.
I saw Tara gave a thumbs up.
Okay, so I removed the certified.
There isn't a process, or it
Okay.
implies there's something that there isn't.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Anyone else? Okay, so then, Angela, are you then satisfied with us just referring to the, what we talked about, the floating homes community, correct? And now we don't have to change anything else?
Yeah, I would say so. And then also in the mandatory mediation letter, it says marina dwelling, it would say, instead of marina, it would say floating home. I think that I would like that change.
So change only there or all the marina words to floating home?
No, just in for the mandatory mediation letter in the
Uh-huh.
last, I think it's the last paragraph. Yep.
Oh,
last
mandatory.
paragraph.
Okay, hold on. You switched letters on me. Hold on.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. That's what I
Okay,
thought.
hold on. We'll get to that. I'm thinking, where is it? I'm looking for it. Okay, so I would just I want to finish up the welcome one so that we can
Okay,
move off of this thing.
All right.
Any other changes to the welcome one?
No.
Okay.
It's been well reviewed, and I think you're ready
Well
to go.
vetted. Well vetted. Okay. Okay, plenty good. So then,
And
so
you'll still consider adding the part about the mediation and form that's required of landlords to give to tenants.
yeah, I
and-
just got to figure out where we put that. That's all.
Perfect.
In the lineup there. So then let's go ahead and the mediation letter, was that the only, now where was that change?
It's in the final paragraph, first line.
Oh, marina. Okay. So you want floating homes there?
Yep, floating home.
Community or floating home?
Just floating home, landlord of a floating home or manufactured dwelling park community.
Okay. Got that? Anyone else?
I would just have one for John on there. Does that sentence need to actually be tenant, comma, landlord, comma, owner? Or is it within the definition of what you said earlier, to just stay landlord? On the very last paragraph of the compliance letter. So
I don't know which,
we're looking
Not
at the
yet.
MMCR CDRC mediation letter final.
I did not edit that one and I didn't suggest any changes to it. You're asking about the last paragraph.
The last paragraph, that's where it's being changed to floating home instead of marina. And right now it says if you are a tenant or landlord, if there needs to be a,
I think that's fine.
okay.
So we're then good on this one?
I am.
Good. That's excellent. Thank you. Let's see what the other things, the agenda. Okay, so then going back to the agenda, I owe you information for 8, 9, and 10B. And then we're up to, we discussed media. So I guess we're at membership recruitment.
Yeah,
Correct.
and Heather gets a gold star for bringing a new, getting one representative, and Jan, being that you weren't here, I'll let you introduce yourself real quick, and Pat, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jan Hamer, and I'm a marina owner and operator. And I thought the meeting started at 11, so I'm late coming in, I think.
I thought you were being very strategic.
Yeah, I think I have a virus and its computer operates off and on, but I had a question about, I think it was number 4.
Okay, and before that, let me have Pat introduce herself. Heather has brought her, she is a is it manager? Is that your correct title, or Pat, or I'll let you unmute yourself and introduce it.
I am the manager of a manufactured home community in Woodburn, Oregon. I've been here 17 and a half years. There's 114 spaces. It's a family home, a family park. So I'm feeling all this combined knowledge is amazing to me. Because I kind of operate down at the nuts and bolts level and less at, I don't know, the paperwork level or the levels that you guys operate at. I have heard John speak on more than one occasion at the MHCO, Manufactured Housing Communities of Oregon. They have a fall conference, and John has presented there over the years. When he presents, I always attend those seminars. They've always been helpful.
Flattery will get you far.
It's all true. It's all true.
And as you can guess, Jan, she is also an advocate of mediation in the mediation process, just as you are as well. And so
I would just say that I think it'd be great if Pat can do this. I don't know, Pat, whether you want to tell Chuck Carpenter that you're doing it. Not that he controls you, but he probably would be interested in knowing that you volunteered. Kim has been pestering Chuck to produce a park landlord or manager to participate. And so you'll probably be relieved to hear that you're willing to do it.
Yeah, and telling Chuck is no problem. I don't have any problem doing that.
Yeah. I have a great relationship with Chuck. I like him a lot.
I really like him. He's so helpful.
Yes. Yeah, it's a lot of that, Pat, which you bring in where I'm so adamant about having that voice is to make sure everything we are saying and talking isn't too much in theory and head, and it is practical and usable and helps the process, as well as we're not creating something that is cumbersome and burdensome, and to, like I said, have all the perspectives of manufactured and marinas represented. So we're advising Oregon Housing on what is helpful. So the voice is very helpful and important.
Well, the thing that's really nice about doing the mediation outside of the courthouse, and that was our only option for a long time, which I used and I liked it. And of course, Marion County, that's what you had to do. But then people don't end up with this on their record. It's not like a courthouse record. Which it doesn't need to be for probably, 99.9% of it or something. So just moving that out of there, I think was really good for tenants.
That's great. Thank you for that. And Jan, you had something on the legislative update piece.
Did we talk about having John help us educate the judges? Because if we did, I missed it.
That had not come up yet because we kind of flowed into the forms and other pieces.
Okay.
And so we haven't circled back around to that item on the agenda, which was actually about next. So thanks for the introduction. So one of the things we've talked about is a good, helpful strategy to help with the educate about the Senate bill, and especially in relationship to the tolling of an FED case if mandatory mediation has not occurred, and how to navigate that within the circuits. Oh, you're on mute, John.
I have not done that because I haven't seen the right opening to do that. As some of you know, I'm married to the Chief Justice, and so I keep up with what she's doing and what the courts are doing. And pretty much the last 2 years, the focus has been trying to figure out how to get through COVID and remote appearances. For example, she issued an order for all the trial courts to allow parties to appear remotely instead of in person. and that's produced a lot of big changes. And so, I mean, they have the circuit, there's two groups here, the circuit judges and the justices of the peace. And justices of the peace also can do evictions, and some counties rely on justice courts to do evictions, like Clackamas. And justices of the peace do not have to be lawyers, although many of them are. And they have their own organization, and they meet annually. The circuit court judges meet twice a year, and I often get to go to those meetings as the spouse. And I know what their agendas have been like for the last 2 years. So I'll keep my eye on when I think there's an opening or a right time, try to talk to the OJD staff. The OJD is the Oregon Judicial Department, and the Chief Justice works closely with the OJD staff to guide the judges, which I should mention, judges are generally people who don't like being told what to do. not even by the Chief Justice. And so you can suggest them, what's that old saying, you can lead a horse to water. So I do want to do this. I just don't want us to assume that it's going to solve all of our problems.
No.
One of my favorite landlord lobbyists, who died of cancer quite a few years ago, used to ask that we adopt a law requiring judges to follow the law. That doesn't work that way, but we can certainly educate them better. It just hasn't risen to the top 5 issues that they have to deal with right now.
No, I appreciate that. And we've addressed the membership and recruitment. And Rick, I guess the last one is an update on CDRC contracts and the attorney contract for you. Oh, you're on mute now.
That is currently back at DOJ. They're reviewing and commenting on some adjustments that were made.
And that's to the attorney one or the?
Yes. As soon as we get that back, we could discuss it. Right now, it's still at DOJ, and I'm not quite sure. Usually anything on turnaround DOJ is usually a minimum of a couple of weeks. So hopefully we'll get those back. I think they were sent in last week. So we'll give it another week, and then I'll try to follow up and see where that is. But that's where we are right now.
So I can supplement Rick on the attorney contract status.
Okay.
I've been in communication with Kim over the last couple of weeks, and as I understand it, that will not be an RFP. It will be a direct grant or contract with Oregon Law Center, and so Oregon Law Center has been authorized to proceed. We will do that. We will draft a job description. We will advertise, and we will hire. And that person that we hire will be in the Lane County office and will be training with me. The caution here is that Law Center has just recently hired something like a dozen new lawyers to do eviction defense during the pandemic, funded largely by Housing and Community Services and all the federal money. And it probably won't be easy or quick for us to find any more new lawyers for this particular. We'll do that. The concept is one lawyer in my office who then will work with other lawyers around the state to provide assistance to manufactured home park and floating home marina tenants on issues. And it won't be, every tenant won't get representation. It will be more like an emergency room deal where you prioritize certain issues in certain cases. But so I think we're at a go for that.
Great. Thank you.
I think on the CDRCs, I know at least we've received a contract and that, and it's being reviewed, and I'm guessing that went out to the other centers as well. So for folks who remember, that was our contract expired back in July, and so been working to get some revisions to them and get them redone and back out so the CDRCs can provide those services. And the last one was, we've talked off and on and wanted to wait to this meeting, was going to make a proposal to change our meeting schedule to an every other month versus a monthly meeting. Part of the theories is it seemed like when we did have projects of work to get done to present at the next meeting, we were all kind of juggling and scrambling at the 11th hour to fulfill our commitments, and that if we went to an every other month, it would allow for us to be more successful with less stress in that. And that it also seemed that a lot of the agenda items in attendance had been waning a little bit as well, just because of people and other commitments and processes. To help with that would be to reduce that to 6 meetings versus the 12, and wanted to get everybody's input on that. And if there was a motion to make that change, or where that's at. So that's what that item is for. Anybody?
I like the idea of going to every other month. Fewer meetings is good for me.
Angela, and thoughts?
I can go to every other month. That would be tremendous for me. And, you know, I'm available to meet in between the times too, as needed. Like Ken and I met, Jan and Ken and I have met outside of the meeting to move things forward. So that's fine.
Yeah, and like I said, that was part of that theory, was to allow those meetings to occur in that, so it wasn't just the cream on that.
What was, may I just ask, what was the concern when we talked about it last time?
That there wasn't a lot of the membership here, for that. It was just UI and I think one other member was more why we put it off.
Okay, just making sure there wasn't another objection that I was forgetting.
Yeah, more procedural. So with that, I'm assuming you're in favor of it as well, then.
Who doesn't like fewer meetings?
Yeah, that, anything to add, Tara, or thumbs up?
Tara just let us know that she has, she'll be right back.
Okay. And that, and if so, if someone would like to make a motion that we amend our, I believe it is our bylaws or piece to meet every other month.
A motion that we amend what is needed to amend to show that we meet every other month rather than monthly.
Any other second? Second from John, great. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye, and everyone's hand is raised to that. And we'll get a confirmation from Jan and Tara when they return. So that was the last item of our agenda in that. And like I said, Pat, is that correct, Rick? That you'll will change information and for the letter of appointment, which I know technically comes from Margaret to the committee.
Letter of appointment of, I'm sorry.
Oh, to this committee. It's for Pat.
Oh,
she was, I hadn't heard her say no or run away, so.
Did she get voluntold? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, and just that formality to align with statute.
Yeah, I'll make sure to follow up on that.
Great.
Pat, is she not back yet?
No, Pat's here. Just Jan and Tara aren't back yet.
Pat, if I could just get your information so that I can just name, address, all that good
Yeah,
stuff.
and you may want to email, I will just remind you, this is a public meeting. I don't know if you want your contact
No,
information.
Yeah, email, yeah, definitely email that me. Yeah,
I privately sent it to Angelina at the beginning of the meeting.
oh, perfect then, no problem.
So
That's
that
where it needs to go.
contact.
I would have done the same thing.
I just wanted, it was just a private, it wasn't, we didn't want.
No, I appreciate that. Either way, I would have needed to get that, so, thank you very much, I appreciate that.
Yes, and so with that, I think we can probably adjourn. And we will see everybody in March.
Perfect.
Thanks, Brian. Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Nice meeting you, Pat.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Brian and
Bruce.
Yes.
everyone.
All right, take care.